really enlightening movie. We have a very enlightening speaker. Her name is Laura Agustin. If you Google the naked anthropologist, you'll get like reams and reams and reams. Her blog will come up. You must read it. We have her here in person, my heroine, Laura Agustin for you. Oh, come on.
What I want to do is try to connect a couple of things. I want to connect Katie's plenary that I hope a lot of you heard. It was possibly the first time that these kinds of issues about sex work as labor and anger at certain kinds of feminism and this business about raids has reached a forum like this. I began 20 years ago thinking about these things also in the development world. And it has been taboo now for a long time, so it's a really big thing that, that we have this session and that Katie had the plenary. I'm the one that, I wrote a book called Sex at the Margins, which Zed Books, they had it, they sold out, which talked about what's the problem with sex work, what's the problem with migrant women who sell sex. And in the course of doing that, I got a PhD, and so I'm the one that then tries to make some kind of theory out of this, some kind of accessible theory that people can understand. A lot of what I said here, I talked at the Institute for Development Studies last fall, and what the topic was called 5 Steps Backward, how women become second-rate citizens of globalization. And this was about to show how certain kinds of feminist and gender equality and state policies have now changed from the empowerment that some of us knew in the 60s and 70s, in which autonomy and my body is my own, and choice and agency, those used to be really important things, and they have now gone down. It seems quite clear to a lot of us that whatever kind of feminism is happening now, there's a movement to silence this kind of idea, to say that all of these girls in the film and the sex workers that are in the room did not choose, that they were the things that Katie said. So I don't want to repeat too much. I referred to this idea of saving women, because it's always about women, as the rescue industry. That it was a metaphor at the time, that there was an industry to set out to save women who had somehow ended up selling sex. And of course, originally it was about women in the third world, it was always about Thailand, now it's about women in Sweden and women in England, and it's a very disturbing tendency. My disturbance about this, I blog about this all the time. So I've been blogging since 2008. There are more than 500 entries in the blogs as I develop my ideas. So there's a lot of resources there if you're interested. So please look. My concern was that I, who am one of the older people in this room, would have the sensation that things had gone backwards. That what happened to the general values that I knew about, and that is the reason that I joined the women's movement before it was called feminism. It was called the women's movement, and that was a really nice thing. The idea of the original women's movement was that there would be opportunity and representation for everyone, that women should take responsibility for themselves, assert themselves, stand up to injustice. You heard, for instance, in Francisca, the plenary speaker, she talked about those values, and she talked about the fact that in their movement, this was campesina in Chile. She was talking about diversity, and she said that we recognized our legitimate differences. That's what I took away from that, that a wide social movement recognizes that everyone does not feel the same way, for instance, about sex. Because that's what the problem here is, about sex, yes? So the fact that some people are fine doing this work and adapt to it and empower themselves and make money is unacceptable to a group of other people who have turned this into an ideological conflict. In a wide women's movement, the legitimate differences would be recognized, that I think this is horrible and I will never do it and I wish you wouldn't do it, but if you did do it because that was your preference, that was the best choice that you had at the time, then I tolerate you and you tolerate me. We've lost that. I don't know how many of you know about these kinds of raids. This comes from, first, the idea that sexual experiences are different from all others, and therefore people have to be rescued from having the wrong kind of sex. I'm sure you all have thoughts about that. That's a basic value that's being considered here, so that while all the other jobs and all the other things that people do, those are all considered choices, this one isn't. And there's many, many hundreds of thousands and millions, of course, if you start including India, there's incredible numbers of people who sell sex in the world and are okay about it. That's just what it is. And so the idea that some group of feminists would try to take this over is, in fact, very disturbing. It's very disturbing. And so what we came here to try to bring that idea, that you don't want one kind of feminism to take over, to make it a symbolic, ideological battle in which one side has to win. But unfortunately, so this problem about sex, as you remember, if you've been reading for a long time, that it was about pornography and prostitution. Those were the problems. And in the last 10 years, since I wrote my book, or 5 years, the idea of trafficking has taken over and has become a major topic with, as you all know, I know you all know, about the statistics that are given that say that millions of people are being enslaved and are forced and are in dungeons, and that these police are needed. These police are needed to go rescue those women. That is what we are saying is very untrue. Usually when I talk about these things, I talk about a continuum in which you can always find the most miserable, upset, victimized person at one end of the spectrum. We're not talking about that. That incredible enslaved person probably exists somewhere in the world. And at the other end is the famous happy hooker who has no problems at all and probably also doesn't exist except maybe there's one, you know? Everyone else is somewhere in the middle of making do with the possibilities that they had in life. But as this has turned into an ideological issue where trafficking has become this key word, this kind of feminism that is hostile to using your body outside of certain kinds of relationships has picked this up, and you probably have noticed they're now turning it into slavery. So in fact, we're hearing less the word trafficking and more the word slavery, so that someone like we would be spoken of as a slave, sex slaves, that people, these girls are sex slaves. So you have a huge exaggeration in order to make an ideological point. You get the mechanism that has developed for this in the 10 years of serious funding. Certainly, George W. Bush was one of the first people to really pick it up and push it as a signature issue. But I'm sorry to say that most countries have gone along with this, that the UN has entire departments and agencies that are dedicated to this. It's all framed as organized crime. So that puts this, the reason that they are police going in there is because the United States has pushed laws, the trafficking against person laws, that say that in order to continue to receive aid, you must comply and have certain kinds of laws against trafficking, and you have to prove that you're enforcing the laws. And so this ridiculous raid will then be reported officially as yet another rescue attempt that went in and found victims. As you can see, even though it was very funny, the police rushing in are not actually interviewing anyone or knowing exactly who's in there for what reason. That's usually the way it is. They don't know beforehand, so they have informants, fine, but they don't really know. So this mechanism, this is the mechanism. The money comes from the United States or the UN. The idea is that you catch the perpetrators, so these are people called traffickers. As I'm sure most of you know, in informal migration and informal labor, which prostitution, sex work is in most countries, you need intermediaries, you need smugglers, you need family members to help you. People pay each other for services to move around and to find jobs. All of these people are being called traffickers. And so when the government spokesman or the fundamentalist feminist comes up and claims that there are 800 million, they haven't been able to actually count that. It's impossible. These are all people that haven't registered at the border, they haven't registered their work, so there are no statistics at all. But we know that there are large amounts of money that go into these programs to rescue people who, in many, many, many cases, do not want to be rescued. They do not want to be rescued. So if the question is, yes, but how can they be happy doing sex work? How can they be happy? Well, the answer is happiness is not what we're talking about. We're talking about people finding their way in life, and that if you wish to rescue them, then the idea would be to talk to that person and ask, you know, are you happy? Do you need anything? Or should I leave you alone? Or is there any way I can help you? This is completely absent. So we have this explosion of funding, largely from the United States. We have these annual reports, the TIP, Trafficking in Person reports, that actually the United States gives a report card to every country to say, how many of these raids have you done? Have you passed the correct law? Have you had lots of raids? How many people have you saved? And in many countries of the world, you can see that the amount of money that's been put into these raids does not correspond well to the number of victims who are actually found and helped. The pentameter in the UK claimed that they go in and detain 2,600 people, and in the end, a few people actually are proved to be victims. So what happens to the others? If they're migrants, they are deported. That's what happens in the migrant thing. They are deported. However, what we'd be looking at in terms of economic analysis of this is what kind of relationship do we have now in which this movement has been sold, that we have slavery is back, and that we have to put vast amounts of money into it, and the number of people that are actually helped. So the question is, we are all inside patriarchy, and there's a lot of really awful things in life, but is this mechanism the one that's actually helping a lot of people? No. You rescue those girls in that bar, you put them in that sewing machine, or they escape and go away, but now they don't have the livelihood that they had. This makes no sense at all. You also get lots of forms of capitalism involved in this now, so it's not just government money. But some of that government money has drawn for vast numbers of NGOs. We certainly have thousands of new NGOs in the world that have been able to be founded because they can get money to do this. That's it. It's anti-trafficking money, and you have people just coming into this to get it. You also have businesses like the Body Shop or lots of other ones that you can think of that say, if you buy our products, we will give the money to save slaves. you know, buy a bar of soap and save this person in Thailand. There's people jumping into this in lots of ways. There's a very big movement that's called End Demand. There's a charlatan called Siddharth Kara who has written a book called Sex Traffic, in which he claims that if you ended all of the demand for prostitution, then it would go away, which is a ludicrous, stupid thing to say about markets. That the idea that if you stopped all the men from buying sex, then no women would sell it. This does not actually obey the market rules, because people move. You can't abolish things generally and in a huge way. To just make clear that we're talking about, the word in the academy is agency. We're talking about the ability to recognize that someone else can make a different decision from your own about her economic or mental or emotional empowerment. That if you want to rescue someone, you need to know very well first what it is that they want before you rush in to help them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Laura. We actually will be opening this up for questions, but we have a 7-minute clip of a real raid and some rehab center, which I think you should see before the questions flow.
And I think that the key is to involve sex workers all the way through all the processes, not to dump on them a piece of law or a policy that can actually work against them, but to consult, to engage and not be scared.
사이바 갈lun자.
Do tao con nhỏ miếng áo nhung xong vậy nên là chắc có bố cái áo ấy chạm vô của mồ đau tặng ó mình thà bố nhom xong cái áo con nhom bẹ màu play mát đây bây bẹ đây còn ha không biết cái áo nào slip bẹ ấy mình thấy nó có bộ cái áo nhưng còn là xong màu play áo con nhom bẹ ấy có thôi nhưng mình sai vậy việc áo ấy nó là thấy mặt đo bên đó mặt đo lấy đấy vì tha buồn năng nó cái xong bài hộp của bên hàng không biết bài ai xí vậy tha tới nhom có bao bẹ với nhom ra cho bao bộ anh không biết bài ai kê hộp của anh chắp cái mau xong cam đấy xong bây giờ không anh vẫn nói bộ anh mất là nật được chắc có bộ anh mới khơi không anh vật phần năng đấy mẹ nó thấy còn hàng bộ ngải như không biết chắc bạp ấy ăn ca bộ ngải mua muối á nhưng xưa bánh cho bà pu cần thà ăn ca bộ nhâm miên chơi mập chơi nhầm này lục pu bánh chơi mập lục pu mấy còn mình chơi bay chơi mơ phong ta không ai phần năng rosi khó mập đây mà nói rosi luộc luôn đó mẹ nè nó ẩm muộn bom mình nuôi phao đâu cầm lặng mong muốn bây giờ tao từ vòng phân nè cái váy á từ vòng mu lá đấy ô cột ô hả mình nuôi phao miếng cầm lặng bên bìa váy tôi đặt bạn hay mình nói sẽ tha ăn đây và con nứng mơ đàn đấy việc chạp này chạp ngầu hụm
nó xuân dân xuân một ra vì từ bông nứng làm pro toàn dân nứng hay nâng làm khăn dân nứng thì đánh chạp chỗ chạp hay bong rồi ruồi chứ nè bong vì đêm năm gì bạn mình làm luôn kê thì đó hay là bom là ai nhá nè hay thay dân nứng bà miền lưới thời ai mà miền cai miền lưới bong rồi băng là giúp nó ban cò chiêng bram mơ rồi hay nè cá mùi giờ on đi chăm đó cái này nó đánh lụm toán với tham gia lột dân bông lột dân chẳng na hay sơ phụ thời cá lụm toán từng on thì cũng cái vay dân này con này thà cái lột dân thì giờ lui giờ cãi những ai chẳng hay kim lột chờ cho đo mùi cho từ mùi chập ấy cho mùi tia chân từ
ai nhom cơ chàng cơ phụ nhom tháng còn phụ nhom nó sập nghe tháng cơ chàng cơ phụ chênh bà dân chênh mình hối cái vài dân một đâyตัวhai nhom trôi nó phi xa hay tăng nhom trôi mình tập bốn nhom pua thom ban bà hai bấm bờ khai cho ba khai bảy cho bảy khai đó nghe bài chụp nó bông hay pe nơi không nắng á chụp ai cái không nắng để từ tận nôm đi
hay chứ là kia mà cao tận nôm rồi
bộ nhom nó kia ba bộ phò nó ao rồi chả ai chênh nữa về đây nhom hột nữa á guitar ai nó cứ ọt miền tật phật ọt miền bài hộp cứ ọt tật món á ọt tật bộ nhom cái chặt cả cơn chàng của quýnh đông tịnh rồi bàn chánh cai ba đôi mẹ cai ba trong bông cục mong.
The sex workers going to underground now is very, don't know where it's going on. Now it's very difficult to Irish worker want to reach out. It's very, very difficult for our part, Irish.
But this, they have talking about it, anti-trafficking law is going on, but I think it's not combined with anti-trafficking and sex workers. Sex workers is a different. Sex work is a work.